TIFU by accidentally sending my boss a picture of my naked butt. So, this happened a few weeks ago, and I'm still cringing every time I think about it. I work for a fairly well-known company, nothing too fancy, but we've got a solid client base, and I've been working here for about a year now. I'm the assistant to the head of marketing, which means I'm usually buried in a lot of emails, spreadsheets, and reports. It's a decent job, and honestly, I've been pretty comfortable in my role. Now, I've been dating this girl for a few months, and we were in one of those fun, early stages of the relationship where everything is exciting. You know, the kind of phase where you're texting each other non-stop, sending weird memes, talking about the most random things, and occasionally sharing less than PG content. It's all part of the getting to know you process, right? One night, after a few glasses of wine, okay, maybe more than a few, I was texting her some silly things, and I decided to send her a photo as a joke. It wasn't anything obscene, just a weird, slightly suggestive picture of me in the bathroom after I got out of the shower. I'm talking about a half-joking shot of my bare butt, in all its glory, with my hand on my hip like I'm posing for a weird calendar. Not exactly a Picasso, but you get the idea. The thing is, I wasn't paying full attention. I was on my phone, scrolling through emails for work, and I was still chatting with my girlfriend. In that moment, I somehow managed to hit the wrong chat window when I went to send the photo. Instead of sending it to her, I accidentally sent the picture to my boss. And I didn't realize it right away. I didn't even notice that the chat window had switched until I heard my phone buzz a second time. At first, I thought it was just a notification from another app or something. But when I looked down, I froze. The message was marked as sent, and I saw my boss's name at the top of the screen. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I opened the conversation, and there it was. My naked butt, staring back at me in full glory. There was no time to process what I had just done. The realization just hit hard, and I immediately started panicking. I went from 0 to full-blown panic mode in a split second. My mind was racing. What the hell was I going to do? How could I explain this? I knew I had to act quickly, so I did what any reasonable person would do in this situation. I immediately tried to delete the message. I frantically swiped at my phone, but, of course, by the time I realized that you can't actually delete messages in real time on my phone's messaging app, it was too late. The damage was done. I stared at my phone, willing it to somehow magically undo the mistake. Of course, it didn't. I had just sent an unsolicited image of my bare butt to my boss, who was a married man in his 40s, and who definitely did not want to see that. I thought I might pass out from the sheer embarrassment. I could feel my palms sweating, my heart racing. It took me a minute to gather myself and stop hyperventilating. I started typing a response. My first draft was, "Sorry, wrong chat." That was meant for my girlfriend. But then, I thought better of it. That might come off as too casual. No, I needed something more professional, something that would make me sound like less of an idiot. So, I deleted it and typed out, "I apologize for the message you just received. That was not intended for you. Please disregard the image, it was a private photo meant for my personal use. I apologize for any inconvenience this may have caused." I read the message over and over, trying to make it sound as formal and nonchalant as possible, though I was secretly dying inside. I hesitated for a long time before hitting send. Finally, I decided I had no choice but to own it. I pressed send. And then I waited. I'm not sure how long it was before my boss replied, but in those agonizing minutes, I had already concocted 1,000 scenarios in my head. What if he fired me? What if he just ignores it and I have to live with this awkwardness for the rest of my time at the company? What if he forwarded the picture to HR? Or worse, what if he posted it in the company chat as some sick joke? But then, the reply came through. My boss responded with a simple, "It's okay, don't worry about it. I've been there myself. Just make sure you double-check next time." I couldn't believe it. Was he serious? Was he actually just going to let this slide? I was so relieved that I could have cried. I immediately texted my girlfriend, telling her the whole story. Her response? "Well, at least you didn't send it to your mom, lol." I laughed, but I was still mortified. That's the thing about making a mistake like this, it doesn't matter how much time passes, you'll never forget it. It will haunt you in the back of your mind forever. Since that day, I've been extra careful with my phone. Every time I send a picture, I double-check the recipient. I've learned the hard way that one wrong tap can send you spiraling into an abyss of embarrassment. But hey, at least I didn't get fired. That's something, right? TLDR, accidentally sent my boss a picture of my bear but instead of my girlfriend. Luckily, he was chill about it, but I'm still dying inside. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. TIFU by not realizing that my roommate was secretly living in my apartment for 5 months. I'm not really the type to make big waves. I keep to myself, I try to stay out of drama, and I like having my own space. I've been living in this apartment for about a year now, and I thought I had a solid routine. My roommate, let's call him Mike, moved in about 5 months ago. We met through a mutual friend who assured me he was a chill guy and needed a place to stay. I didn't think much of it. Mike seemed cool when we first met. He was laid back, easy to talk to, and he seemed to have a lot of respect for privacy. When he moved in, everything seemed fine. He would come home, we'd chat briefly, maybe grab a drink or watch a movie together, but we kept mostly to ourselves. His side of the apartment was his, mine was mine, and that was that. A few months in, I started to notice something a little strange. Mike seemed to be home a lot. I didn't think much of it at first because I knew he worked from home. But over time, I started realizing that he was home, like all the time. There were days when I'd come back from work, and his shoes were by the door, his computer was running in the living room, and I'd barely hear him move. At first, I just assumed he was really buried in work. He was one of those people who would talk about how busy he was all the time, and I guess I just took it at face value. But then, things started to get weird. I'd be at home late at night, watching TV in the living room, and I would hear Mike's voice faintly coming from his room. Not talking, but what sounded like murmuring or someone on a phone call. I didn't think too much of it. I figured he was probably talking to a friend or family member, maybe even on a Zoom call. But after a while, I realized I never saw anyone come over. Not once. At some point, I started wondering if maybe Mike had some sort of unusual work schedule, like a late-night shift, or perhaps he was a night owl. Maybe he just preferred to work in the peace and quiet of the apartment. But there was one problem, I never saw him leave. Not once in the middle of the night or early in the morning. He was always there, always in his room or the living room. A couple of weeks ago, I had an actual conversation with him about it. I said something like, "Hey man, you're always here. Don't you ever go out?" And he just laughed it off, saying he was kind of a homebody. I figured maybe he was just a bit of a recluse and shrugged it off. Then, last week, I came home a little earlier than usual. As I walked into the apartment, I heard a noise coming from the hallway. I thought it was just Mike getting some food out of the fridge, but when I walked into the kitchen, I was taken aback. There, standing in the kitchen with a bag of chips, was a woman I didn't recognize. She was in the middle of chewing and looking very startled. I froze. She froze. Then she just laughed awkwardly and said, "Oh, Mike didn't tell you I was here?" I shook my head, my mind racing. "Who the hell are you?" She looked at me, confused, and said, "I'm Sarah, Mike's girlfriend. He didn't mention that we were hanging out tonight?" I was honestly flabbergasted. I had no idea what to say. Mike had never mentioned a girlfriend. He didn't mention much of anything about his personal life. I had no clue that he was even seeing anyone. He'd always been so private, and even though we got along, he never once talked about relationships or anything like that. I'm sorry, I had no idea, I said, trying to recover. I didn't know Mike was seeing anyone. Sarah just shrugged and smiled awkwardly. Well, yeah, I've been over a lot. We've been hanging out for a while. She then added, it's been kind of weird though, since Mike's been acting a little distant lately. She paused and then added, but you probably know that already. I stared at her, completely stunned. My mind was racing. If Mike had a girlfriend and was hanging out here all the time, why had I never seen her before? Why had I never noticed anything out of the ordinary? I felt like I was losing my mind. I went into my room to process everything and sat down on my bed. Then it hit me, Mike had been working from home the entire time. But working from home wasn't exactly what I thought it meant. I realized then that he wasn't working at all. He had been living here without telling me, and I had been completely oblivious. I spent the next few days trying to piece everything together. I asked Mike directly, how long have you been living here? And he just blinked at me, clearly confused by the question. What do you mean? I've been living here the whole time. No, I said. But you've been here every single day. I never see you leave. You never go out. You never talk about anything outside of work. That's when he finally admitted it. Apparently, Mike had been living in my apartment full-time for months, but he'd been avoiding telling me the truth. He had this elaborate cover-up, telling me he was working from home when in fact he was just holed up in his room all the time. He didn't want me to think he was a weird recluse, so he kept up the pretense of work. And I'd bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. But it wasn't just that. Mike had also been inviting his girlfriend over almost every single day. Sarah had been there regularly for months, and I had never noticed her. I had never realized that Mike had been living two lives, one with me in the apartment and the other with her, in the background, mostly hidden from me. To make things even stranger, Mike had apparently been making excuses to avoid talking about his personal life to me because he didn't want me to judge him. He thought I might think he was lazy or that he didn't have his life together. Meanwhile, I was just sitting there, totally unaware that this guy had been living an entirely different reality right under my nose. The whole situation left me feeling a little bit betrayed, to be honest. I had no idea what was going on in the apartment I thought was mine, and I had no idea that Mike had been quietly living a life I knew nothing about. So now, 5 months later, I've learned that my roommate wasn't just someone sharing an apartment with me, he was living a secret life, and I was just along for the ride, completely oblivious. TLDR, I thought my roommate was just a homebody working from home, but I found out he'd been secretly living with his girlfriend for 5 months without telling me. I never realized it until a random encounter with his girlfriend made everything click. TIFU by inviting my ex to my wedding. So, this is something that just happened a couple of days ago, and I'm still in shock. It feels like my whole life just did a complete 180 in a matter of hours. I've had some time to process it, but I'm honestly not sure how I feel about it yet, so I'm going to throw it out here and let you all judge if I'm an idiot or if it was just a bad situation from the get-go. Alright, to start things off, I, 28M, am getting married to my amazing fiancée, 27F, Sarah. We've been together for almost 5 years now, and it's been pretty smooth sailing, aside from some minor bumps, but what relationship doesn't have those? We got engaged about a year ago, and we've been busy planning the wedding for the last few months. Everything was coming together perfectly, or so I thought. Now, let me rewind a little bit. Back when I was in college, I had a serious relationship with my ex, Emma, 29F. We were together for about 3 years, and I honestly thought we were going to get married. I loved her deeply, but, like so many college relationships, it ended in a messy breakup. Emma and I didn't speak for over a year after that, and even though I'd moved on, I still had a lot of unresolved feelings from the way things ended. We never really got closure, and there were still a lot of things left unsaid between us. Fast forward a couple of years, and I've met Sarah. She's everything I've ever wanted in a partner: kind, beautiful, funny, and, more importantly, she has a heart of gold. We've talked about our past relationships openly, and I told her about Emma. I didn't go into every detail, but I told her the basics of what happened. Sarah's understanding, and I felt like I'd done a good job of making peace with my past. I thought I was in a great place, ready to start my future. Here's where things start to get weird. About 6 months ago, I got a message on Facebook from Emma. I had no idea how she even found me since we'd lost touch years ago, but there she was, apologizing for everything that happened between us. She said she'd been thinking about me a lot lately and just wanted to clear the air. She wanted to know if we could have some closure, maybe even meet up for coffee to talk. I told Sarah about it right away, and she was super supportive. She encouraged me to meet Emma and get whatever closure I needed to move on completely. I thought it was a good idea, so I agreed. We met up, and honestly, it was a little awkward at first. Emma apologized for how things ended, and we both talked about our respective lives since the breakup. She told me about her job, her relationships, and how she'd been dealing with the fallout of our breakup. I shared my own experiences, and after a while, it felt like we were just two people talking about the past. It was fine. There were no sparks or anything like that, and I was glad that I had done it. I felt like I had finally closed that chapter in my life. So here's the big mistake I made. A few weeks ago, I got the idea to invite Emma to our wedding. I don't know what I was thinking at the time, but I figured that since we'd gotten closure, it would be a nice gesture. I honestly didn't think Sarah would mind. It was just one of those things where I thought it would be a friendly, "Hey, we've both moved on, let's be amicable." I wanted to be a bigger person about it and let her be a part of this big moment in my life. I told Sarah that I was thinking of inviting Emma. I didn't think it was a big deal, but I guess it was. Sarah's reaction was not what I expected. She was quiet for a while, then asked me why I felt the need to invite her, especially when it was clear that she wasn't a part of my life anymore. I tried to explain that it wasn't a big deal, that we'd made amends, and that it wasn't like I was trying to rekindle anything. I just wanted to be civil. That didn't go over well. Sarah told me she didn't feel comfortable with it. She was hurt that I would even consider inviting my ex to our wedding, and she said it felt disrespectful. I tried to assure her that I wasn't trying to make her feel bad, but the more we talked, the more I realized that I'd made a huge mistake. I'd failed to consider how this would affect her feelings, and I had completely disregarded her perspective. Things got tense between us for a while. We argued, and I could tell that this was eating away at her. I thought I had messed up, but I didn't realize the extent of it until I found out that Sarah had actually been talking to some of her friends about it. Her best friend, Kate, was adamantly against me inviting Emma, and that opinion seemed to spread among her friends. They all felt like it was a huge red flag that I was still in contact with my ex, and it made them question whether I was truly over her. Sarah's family also got involved, and the pressure was building. Eventually, I decided to back down and told Sarah that I wouldn't invite Emma. I thought it would be enough to fix things, but that's when the real disaster happened. Emma, not knowing what was going on behind the scenes, texted me the day before the wedding. She said she was really looking forward to seeing me and that she had RSVP'd for the wedding. I immediately panicked and texted her back, saying I'd changed my mind and that I didn't want her to come. I tried to call her to explain, but she didn't answer. The next day, on the morning of the wedding, I ran into her at the venue. She had shown up anyway, thinking everything was fine. It was so awkward. I had no idea what to do, and I could see the look on Sarah's face as soon as she saw Emma standing there. It was like everything hit the fan in that one moment. To make matters worse, Emma started talking to some of my relatives who had no idea what was going on. She was mingling, and Sarah was furious. She told me I needed to make a choice, either Emma left or we were done. I felt trapped, like I had no way out. After some tense back and forth, I finally asked Emma to leave, and she did, but not before some awkward exchanges that made the situation worse. In the end, the wedding went on, but the damage was done. Sarah was upset the whole day, and I felt like I had ruined what should have been one of the happiest moments of our lives. We've talked about it since, but I can tell that things aren't the same. She's still hurt by my decision, and I can't help but feel like I betrayed her trust by even considering inviting Emma in the first place. So, yeah, I guess I really fucked up. I'm not sure how to fix things at this point, and I'm left wondering if I did something completely unforgivable. To be honest, I wish I could go back and make a different choice, but I can't change what happened. I just hope Sarah and I can get through this, but I don't know if it will ever be the same. TIFU by thinking I could handle the situation with my ex without making everything worse. TIFU by accidentally breaking into my neighbor's house during a blackout and thinking I was being robbed. It was a Tuesday night, and I had just gotten back from a long day at work. I live in a small town, and things tend to be pretty quiet around here. I live in a modest 2-story house with thick walls and squeaky floors that creak when you walk on them. I always thought it was a little charming, but it's definitely not a place you'd expect any sort of excitement. That night, I was looking forward to a quiet evening. I had some leftovers in the fridge, and I was planning on binge-watching a new show I'd been meaning to catch up on. My usual routine on nights like these is to heat up dinner, change into some comfortable clothes, and then lose myself in whatever I'm watching. But that night, I had no idea that my evening was about to take a very strange turn. Around 8 p.m., the power went out. It wasn't unusual for the power to flicker occasionally due to storms, but this time it stayed off. It was a little inconvenient, but I wasn't too concerned. I'd lived through blackouts before, and I knew the drill. I grabbed a flashlight from the drawer in the kitchen, lit some candles, and settled in to wait it out. I was still hoping to get in a few episodes before bed, but I was starting to realize that wasn't going to happen. After about an hour of sitting in the dark, I heard a noise outside. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then it came again. A loud scraping sound. It sounded like someone was dragging something heavy across the ground. My heart started to race. I stood up and peeked through the curtains. I couldn't see anything, but the noise continued. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I began to feel uneasy. I tried to dismiss the thought, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there. Then, I heard a faint knock on my front door. I froze. Who would be knocking at my door during a blackout? The whole town was out of power. I didn't know anyone who would just stop by unannounced. I considered calling the police, but I didn't want to overreact. Maybe it was just a neighbor trying to check in. I walked cautiously toward the door, trying to decide whether or not I should answer it. Then, I heard the knock again. But this time, it wasn't at the front door. It was coming from the side of the house. It sounded like it was near the window. My heart pounded in my chest. My mind raced through a dozen possibilities, none of them good. I stepped back and grabbed a metal baseball bat I kept by the door. I felt ridiculous, but I wasn't sure what else to do. I tried to steady my breath and think logically, but fear kept clouding my thoughts. What if someone was trying to rob me? What if they were armed? I didn't have a plan. I'd always thought I'd be calm in a crisis, but right then, I was more concerned about keeping myself safe. I turned off the flashlight and moved toward the window, trying to stay as quiet as possible. The knocking had stopped, but the scraping noise was still there. It was so close. My hands were trembling as I pulled back the curtain just enough to see what was happening outside. That's when I saw it, a shadowy figure standing at my neighbor's back door, fiddling with the lock. My first thought was that this person was definitely up to no good. They were trying to break into my neighbor's house. Maybe they'd already done it. I needed to do something. Without thinking, I rushed out the back door, baseball bat in hand, and made my way around the side of the house. The moon was barely visible behind thick clouds, and I stumbled a little in the dark. I made it to my neighbor's backyard and crouched behind the bushes, trying to get a better look. The person at the back door wasn't acting like a burglar. They were standing there, fiddling with something on the door, but they weren't in a hurry. They seemed calm, almost methodical. I figured they were just waiting for the right moment. I decided I needed to act fast. I emerged from behind the bushes and walked toward the figure, raising my bat. I shouted at them to freeze, demanding that they stay right where they were. My voice shook, but I was trying to sound confident. "Hey! What do you think you're doing?" I shouted. "I'm calling the cops." The figure immediately whipped around, and my heart stopped. For a brief second, we just stood there, staring at each other. The figure was wearing a dark hoodie, their face hidden in shadow. They didn't say anything, but I could tell they were startled. Then, they spoke, and what they said almost made me drop the bat. "What the hell are you doing?" the voice said, clearly surprised. "What's your problem?" I blinked, confused. I was prepared for a confrontation, but not like this. The voice didn't sound threatening. In fact, it sounded familiar. Too familiar. That's when it clicked. It was my neighbor, Steve. Steve and I had exchanged pleasantries in passing, but we weren't exactly close. I knew he had been having some issues with his back door, so he'd mentioned a while ago that he was going to fix it. I hadn't realized he was working on it that night, especially with the blackout going on. I stood there, bat still raised, staring at him in shock. "Steve?" I said, my voice wavering. "Yeah, it's me." "What the hell, man? What are you doing with that bat?" He sounded almost annoyed. I felt like an idiot. I had just run outside, ready to hit him with a bat, thinking he was an intruder. I was mortified. I lowered the bat slowly, my face turning bright red. I thought you were. I thought you were someone else," I stammered. "Obviously," Steve said dryly, rolling his eyes. "You're lucky I didn't call the cops on you." I looked at him, still feeling like a total idiot. I tried to explain the situation, but my words kept getting jumbled. The knocking, the scraping noise, it had all made sense in my panic. I had just assumed the worst. "I didn't mean to," I started. Clearly, Steve interrupted with a half-smile. "Next time, how about you ask before you try to hit someone with a bat?" I stood there, utterly embarrassed. Steve assured me that he was just trying to fix his back door during the blackout, and he hadn't even realized the noise was making me paranoid. He ended up laughing a little at how ridiculous the whole thing was. I think he could tell I was genuinely sorry, so he didn't press it too much. I apologized again before walking back to my house, my face still red. As I sat down to finally eat my cold dinner, I couldn't help but think about how a simple misunderstanding and a little panic had led to me almost assaulting my neighbor. It's safe to say I'll be a lot more careful next time I hear strange noises in the dark. Moral of the story? Don't jump to conclusions in the middle of a blackout, and don't try to be a hero when you're holding a baseball bat and have no idea what's going on. I think I'll be keeping a closer eye on my neighbors from now on, but with a little less aggression. TIFU, by accidentally crashing my friend's wedding with an emotional meltdown that wasn't even mine. So, let me set the scene. My best friend, Emma, was getting married to this great guy, Ben. They'd been together for about 5 years and were practically the epitome of #couple goals. Ben was a great guy. Super supportive, caring, and funny. And Emma, well, Emma was my best friend since elementary school. We had been through everything together. Bad boyfriends, great boyfriends, bad jobs, good jobs, terrible family gatherings, and everything in between. We knew each other inside and out. I was the maid of honor, and naturally, I was excited for her big day. I was also a little nervous because this wedding was not just any wedding, it was a huge deal. Emma had been planning it for months, and she wanted everything perfect. every detail had been meticulously arranged, and all the right people were invited. Now, here's where the trouble started. A few weeks before the wedding, Emma had asked me if I would give a speech at the reception. I'd never given a speech at a wedding before, but I was honored that she wanted me to say something. So, I agreed. She said, just keep it light, fun, and don't make it too sappy. Fine. Easy enough, right? The problem, though, was that I've had this long-standing crush on Ben. Yeah, I know, TIFU by falling for my best friend's fiancé. It sounds cliché, but hear me out, Ben and I had this unspoken connection. We'd spent hours talking late into the night while Emma was busy doing wedding prep stuff, and somewhere along the line, I developed feelings. It didn't help that Ben was a genuinely warm and caring guy who treated me like a sister, and we always joked around in this way that made me feel like we could easily be more than friends. But, of course, I kept it to myself. Because, I would never do anything to ruin Emma's happiness. I kept telling myself that I had it under control. I wasn't going to let my feelings show. But as the wedding day drew nearer, the more anxious I became. Fast forward to the wedding day. I woke up feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. I was in the bridal suite with Emma and her family, and everything seemed to be going according to plan. The ceremony was beautiful, everything was perfect. Emma was glowing, Ben was teary-eyed, and I couldn't help but feel this overwhelming mixture of happiness for them and, well, envy, if I'm being honest. After the ceremony, the reception was in full swing. The food was delicious, the music was great, and everyone was laughing and dancing. I was having a blast and trying my hardest to push down the weird feelings I was having. Then, the time came for my speech. It was my moment to shine and show Emma how much I loved and cared for her. I walked up to the microphone, holding my notes and trying not to look like I was shaking. The crowd fell silent, and all eyes were on me. Emma gave me a proud smile, Ben gave me a supportive wink, and I took a deep breath. Now, I should have stuck to the script. I really should have. But for some reason, something inside me snapped, and I felt a wave of emotions hit me all at once. I just want to say, Emma, you've been my best friend for so long, I began, trying to stay calm. We've been through so much together. And seeing you with Ben, it's so beautiful to see how happy you are. The crowd was hanging on every word, and I was feeling more and more overwhelmed. I had never given a speech like this, and I wanted it to be perfect for Emma. But my emotions were running wild, and I wasn't thinking straight. I continued, and Ben, you're the kind of guy I always imagined for her. You make her so happy, and that's all I ever wanted for her. I just want you to know that I think you're an amazing guy. Then, instead of wrapping up, I blurted out, I mean, you really are the kind of guy I would have wanted for myself, but I'm happy for you both. There was a moment of silence in the room, and I suddenly realized what I had just said. A horrified gasp escaped me as I saw Emma's face fall. Her smile faded, and Ben looked visibly confused. I froze. My brain scrambled to fix the situation, but the words just kept spilling out, fueled by my own emotions. I mean, what I meant was, I'm happy for you guys, of course. But you know, sometimes you wonder what might have been, right? Anyway, I'm so happy for you both. I hope you have a lifetime of love and happiness. The room was awkwardly silent. Emma's mom had her hand over her mouth, and I could see the discomfort on the faces of some of the guests. Emma's face was pale, and Ben just looked confused and a little uncomfortable. I could feel the tension rising in the air, and my heart dropped into my stomach. Emma finally spoke, her voice tight, thank you, my name. I think we should move on to the next part of the evening. I sat back down quickly, feeling like I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. The room felt colder. The music started again, but the mood had definitely shifted. At that point, I wanted to disappear. The rest of the evening was a blur. I tried to act normal, but Emma barely spoke to me for the rest of the night. She didn't seem mad, just distant. Ben was polite but seemed more preoccupied than usual. The next morning, I received a text from Emma, "We need to talk." I immediately freaked out, wondering if I had ruined our friendship. When we finally spoke on the phone, Emma was calm but clearly hurt. She told me that my speech had made her uncomfortable and that it wasn't fair to put her in that position. She said she understood that I might have feelings for Ben, but it wasn't the time or place to make it known. I felt like absolute garbage. I apologized over and over, but Emma said it would take time for her to process everything. We agreed to give each other some space, and I spent the next few days feeling terrible about what I'd done. Thankfully, after a few weeks, Emma and I were able to talk things through. She admitted that she was hurt, but she also said she understood that emotions can get the best of you. We both apologized again, and while things were a bit awkward for a while, we were able to move past it. As for Ben? Well, I tried to distance myself from him after that, just to give Emma and him space to enjoy their new life together. But he ended up sending me a message a few days later, saying that he understood my feelings but didn't feel the same way. He said he hoped we could still be friends, and that honestly made things a little easier. In the end, I learned a valuable lesson about boundaries and timing. You can't let your emotions run wild in moments that are important to other people, especially when it involves their big day. If I had just kept my emotions in check and stuck to the script, I would have avoided making everyone uncomfortable and embarrassing myself in the process. So yeah, that's how I almost ruined my best friend's wedding by accidentally revealing my unrequited feelings for her fiancé. Long story short, don't give a speech when you're emotionally unstable. And definitely don't do it when your emotions are tied up in a situation you should have let go of a long time ago. It was just supposed to be a quiet Saturday morning, nothing out of the ordinary. I woke up early, made myself a cup of coffee, and started scrolling through my phone while half listening to the low hum of the neighborhood. I live in a suburban area where the most exciting thing on any given day is the sound of a lawnmower or someone bringing in groceries. I was going to spend the day running errands, doing laundry, and maybe catching up on a show later. However, that simple plan quickly spiraled into chaos. It all started when I realized that I had left my keys in the car the night before. This wasn't unusual. I'm one of those people who constantly forgets where they put things, especially in a rush. It wasn't the first time I'd done it, and I figured I'd just run out, grab my keys, and be on my way. But as soon as I walked outside, I was hit with a wave of confusion. I looked around, but the car wasn't in the driveway. I did a quick double take. My first thought was that maybe I had parked somewhere else, perhaps on the street or at the neighbor's house. But no, the car was completely gone. I started to feel a slight sense of panic as I checked the street, the front yard, and even the neighbors' driveways. Nothing. Now, I knew something was up. The first thing that crossed my mind was that the car had been stolen. I was living in a relatively safe neighborhood, but even the safest places weren't immune to occasional criminal activity, right? I rushed back inside, grabbed my phone, and dialed the police. As I was explaining the situation, I began mentally retracing my steps. Had I forgotten something? Was I sure I didn't park it somewhere else? The officer on the other end of the phone was patient but gave me some basic instructions. Confirm the car wasn't somewhere nearby, check your security cameras, and let us know if you find anything unusual. With the police on hold, I decided to go inside and look through my security footage. I don't have anything fancy, just a few basic cameras around the perimeter of the house, but it was better than nothing. The last thing I wanted was to waste anyone's time if I was just being forgetful. I reviewed the footage from the night before. Around 10:45 p.m., I could see myself leaving the house to get in my car. I had no idea at the time, but I had been distracted by a text message. My hands were full with my phone, and in my distracted state, I left the car running while I went back inside the house to grab something I'd forgotten. I didn't think much of it at the time, but in the footage, you could clearly see me going back inside and leaving the door wide open behind me. And that's when I saw it. A person, not in the best condition, shuffled into view. It was hard to make out details, but they were definitely approaching my car. I froze. The person didn't seem to notice my car running, but then they did something completely bizarre. They opened the driver's side door, peered inside, and then, without a word, got in and started the car. My heart skipped a beat. This was definitely not a random act of theft. This wasn't some guy trying to make a quick getaway in the middle of the night. This person had no intention of stealing the car for resale or joyrides. They were clearly out of it. The footage wasn't clear enough to make out much more than their hunched-over, disheveled figure, but it was enough to tell me that whoever this was, they had somehow ended up in my car, still running, and just took off with it. Panicking, I got off the phone with the police and immediately called a tow truck service, thinking maybe my car had been towed for some reason. When I told the operator my car was missing, the tow company didn't have any record of a pickup in the area. This sent me back to square one. By now, the adrenaline had fully kicked in, and I was in a full-blown state of freak-out. My head was spinning as I processed what to do next. I started calling my friends and family, trying to piece together any clue that could help. That's when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but I answered anyway. "Hello?" I said, trying to sound calm despite the rising panic in my chest. A muffled voice responded, "Is this the owner of a blue Honda Civic?" I froze. "Yes." "Who is this?" We found your car. It's been parked here for a while. You might want to come get it." I didn't even ask questions. I grabbed my shoes, shoved my phone in my pocket, and rushed out the door. Whoever this was, they had found my car and, judging by their tone, it didn't sound like they were involved in any kind of crime. I didn't care at that point, I just wanted to get my car back. It took me all of 5 minutes to get to the location. The car was parked in front of an old, run-down building on the other side of town, a place I'd never seen before. The blue Honda Civic was there, parked in a seemingly random spot. I parked behind it, stepped out, and looked around cautiously. Just as I walked up to my car, the person who had called me appeared out of nowhere. They were a middle-aged man, wearing a stained jacket and looking completely out of sorts. He seemed apologetic as he approached, a little too nervous to make direct eye contact. So. I don't really know how to explain this, but," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "What happened?" I demanded, my frustration finally boiling over. "I didn't mean to steal your car. I didn't even know it was a car. I thought it was, he hesitated. I thought it was one of those self-driving cars, you know?" I blinked, stunned. "What?" "Yeah, I've been living off the grid for a while, and I thought it was one of those cars that drives itself. I got in, and it just started driving, but I was so messed up that I didn't really understand what was happening. It only hit me when I parked it here. I'm sorry, man." I had no idea what to say. My car, which had been missing for over 2 hours, had been driven around town by a guy who thought it was a self-driving vehicle. I just stared at him, trying to process everything. After what felt like an eternity of silence, I finally managed to say, "You thought my car was a self-driving car?" "Yeah," he said, sheepishly. "I was trying to figure out how to get it to move. But I mean, it did. I'm not a thief, okay?" It took everything in me not to laugh. The absurdity of the situation was just too much. I was half angry, half in disbelief, but also trying to process the surreal nature of the whole thing. This guy had just taken my car for a joyride, and now I was standing in front of him, listening to an explanation that made absolutely no sense. Eventually, the police showed up, and the guy was questioned. He wasn't arrested, but it turns out he had been living out of his van for the past few months and had, for some reason, developed a strange delusion that my car was a self-driving vehicle. After all was said and done, they let him go, and I was left standing next to my car, wondering if I'd just experienced one of the weirdest mornings of my life. So, yeah. TIFU by having my car stolen by someone who thought it was a self-driving car. TIFU by attempting to impress my new girlfriend with an elaborate dinner, and ended up setting my kitchen on fire and having to explain it to my parents. So, to set the scene, I had just started dating this girl, Emily. We had been talking for a few weeks and hit it off pretty quickly. She's the kind of person who's always been into the finer things, good food, expensive wine, you name it. Meanwhile, I'm more of a let's order pizza kind of guy. But I really liked her, and I wanted to do something special for our first official date night at my place. I decided to cook her dinner. Not just any dinner, though. No, I wanted to make it fancy. I was thinking along the lines of a 3-course meal, complete with a fancy starter, a main course that involved some obscure cooking technique, and of course, a decadent dessert. I mean, how hard could it be, right? I watch cooking shows all the time, and I know how to make scrambled eggs. I figured I'd just Google a recipe and follow the steps. Simple, right? So, I spent the whole day preparing. I went to the store, bought all the ingredients, and even splurged a bit on a bottle of expensive wine. I had no idea about wine, but I knew Emily liked it, so I figured it was a good investment. I set up my kitchen, turned on some fancy music, and started cooking. I was feeling pretty confident at first. The starter was going well, a simple bruschetta with some tomatoes, basil, and a balsamic glaze. No big deal. The main course, however, was where I thought I could really show off. I had found a recipe for pan-seared duck breast with a raspberry reduction sauce. It sounded complicated, but I was determined to pull it off. I even bought a meat thermometer because I didn't want to mess it up. Things started to go south when I realized I wasn't really sure how long to cook the duck. I mean, how do you know when it's medium rare, right? I kept poking at it with the thermometer and flipping it over like a madman, but it just didn't feel like it was coming together. I was trying to juggle multiple things at once, duck on the stove, raspberry sauce simmering on the other burner, and a salad on the side. My kitchen was becoming a chaotic mess. I could feel the sweat forming on my forehead, but I pressed on. Then disaster struck. I got distracted for just a moment while checking the recipe on my phone, and when I looked back, the raspberry sauce had started to burn. In a panic, I grabbed the pan to stir it, but in my haste, I knocked the bottle of olive oil I had left on the counter. It tipped over, and I didn't realize it at first. The oil spilled onto the stove and created a slick, dangerous surface. A moment later, the burner caught the oil, and the entire stovetop erupted in flames. I froze. I mean, I've seen people on TV freak out when this happens, but it's different when it's you. The flames shot up, and I felt like I was in a movie, only this was real life, and there was no camera crew around to tell me what to do next. I panicked. I grabbed the nearest dish towel and tried to smother the flames, but of course, that just made it worse. The flames spread to the towel, and now I had fire in 2 places. I grabbed the fire extinguisher, which, for some inexplicable reason, I had never actually checked to see if it worked. Spoiler alert, it didn't. The nozzle came off in my hand, and I was left holding an empty, useless extinguisher. In a full-blown panic, I called 911. The operator was calm, as they always are in these situations, and instructed me to evacuate the house. So, I did what any rational person would do. I ran outside, leaving the fire to do its worst. I had just locked the door behind me when I realized Emily was supposed to be arriving soon. I could see her walking up the driveway as the fire trucks pulled up. I stood there, in utter shame, as she looked at me with wide eyes, then glanced over at the fire truck and the rapidly growing plume of smoke coming from my kitchen window. I could only imagine what was running through her mind. She must have thought I was some kind of irresponsible mess, and honestly, at that point, I couldn't blame her. The fire department arrived quickly, thankfully, and after about half an hour, they had things under control. I tried to explain to the firefighters that it was just an accident, but at this point, I was too embarrassed to really say anything coherent. They took a quick look around and assured me everything was fine, but my kitchen was completely ruined. The stove was toast, literally, and the walls were blackened from the smoke. They told me to take some time and let the house air out, and they left, leaving me standing outside with Emily. She looked at me, her eyes full of confusion. I didn't even know what to say. I apologized a million times, but she just kind of shrugged. She said it was no big deal but then made some awkward excuse about how she had to go home. We agreed to reschedule, but I could tell she was uncomfortable. I was mortified. And that wasn't even the worst part. Later that night, I had to call my parents to let them know what happened. My mom answered and immediately started yelling at me about how I should have been more careful and how I needed to get my act together. Then my dad got on the phone and asked if I had burned down the house. I was pretty sure he was trying to be funny, but I wasn't laughing. The next day, I got an email from my landlord letting me know that there was substantial damage to the kitchen, and I'd have to pay for repairs. The estimated cost? Over $30,000. So, not only did I ruin my first dinner date with Emily, but now I had to deal with the financial fallout. It was the most expensive impress your girlfriend moment I've ever had. And to top it all off, Emily never really responded to my attempts to apologize after that night. She ended up ghosting me entirely, which, in hindsight, was probably for the best. Long story short, I learned a valuable lesson. Cooking a fancy meal to impress someone is a terrible idea when you have no idea what you're doing. And next time, I'm sticking to takeout. I might have burned the house down, but at least I can still eat pizza. TIFU by accidentally setting my mom's kitchen on fire and blaming it on a magic frying pan. It all started on a regular Saturday morning. My mom, being a fairly organized woman, had a routine for everything. She always made breakfast around 8 a.m., and I always woke up too late to join her. However, I had a rare day off from work, and I thought I would surprise her by making breakfast for both of us. It seemed like the perfect opportunity to finally give back a little after years of her taking care of me. I mean, how hard could it be to fry some eggs and toast, right? Now, full disclosure, I'm not the most skilled in the kitchen. My expertise revolves mainly around microwaving frozen burritos, reheating pizza, and the occasional ramen noodle disaster. But today felt different. I was going to show my mom that I was capable of more than just avoiding her kitchen. I could do this. I could cook. I started by scrounging around in the kitchen, looking for eggs and bread. After a quick inventory check, I found everything I needed. I grabbed a frying pan from the cabinet. Now, here's where the first mistake happened. I had never used this particular pan before. It was shiny, almost unnaturally clean, and had some kind of weird engraving on the bottom. I thought it was just an expensive, fancy pan, so I decided to use it. I didn't think to check if it was something special, like a non-stick or cast iron. I just assumed it was a normal frying pan. I set it on the stove and turned the burner to medium-high. As the pan heated up, I went ahead and cracked 2 eggs into a bowl. I'd watched my mom do this a million times, so how hard could it be? But when I poured the eggs into the pan, something strange happened. The eggs hit the surface and immediately started to sizzle, much more aggressively than I anticipated. Within seconds, the eggs were spitting and popping like a firecracker show. I jerked back, startled, and nearly dropped the entire bowl of eggs. I should have known better than to turn up the heat without checking the pan, but I was too focused on impressing my mom. That's when things took a turn for the worse. The eggs were now completely out of control. The sizzling grew louder, and suddenly, I noticed the pan was starting to smoke. A lot. I felt a little panic rising in my chest, but I figured it would stop soon. I mean, it was just eggs, right? Wrong. The smoke kept increasing, and the eggs were now splattering in every direction. At this point, I realized I should probably turn the heat down. I reached over to the stove to adjust the dial, but as I did, something happened that I never saw coming. The frying pan, which had been heating up for about 3 minutes at this point, started to glow. I am not exaggerating. The damn thing was glowing. The handle was slightly warm to the touch, but the surface of the pan looked like it was emitting a soft red hue, almost like an ember. I froze in place. Was this a special frying pan? Had my mom somehow purchased some magic cookware that I didn't know about? Was this the moment I'd discovered her secret? Still, I didn't have time to dwell on it. I grabbed the spatula and started to stir the eggs, but by now, it was like I was stirring molten lava. The eggs were so cooked that they were practically burnt, but still, the heat kept increasing. It felt like I was in some kind of heat chamber. I looked at the back burner, and I saw that there was smoke coming from the edges of the pan. Panic surged through me. I decided to act fast. I turned the heat off completely, hoping that would stop the madness. But when I tried to remove the pan from the burner, it wouldn't budge. It was stuck. Stuck like glue. The handle was so hot now, I couldn't touch it with my bare hand, so I grabbed a dish towel and tried to pry it free. But when I pulled, the entire pan shot forward like a missile, almost knocking me out cold. That's when I heard the sound. A small, faint whoosh of air. Then, a faint crackling sound. And before I could process what was happening, flames shot up from the edges of the pan. It was like something out of a nightmare. I didn't even have time to think about what to do next. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, one of those huge, overstuffed oven mitts, and desperately tried to swat the flames down. But instead of calming the fire, I ended up knocking the pan off the stove. That's when things got even worse. The frying pan, still flaming, hit the floor and bounced. The fire spread quickly across the counter, igniting the paper towels, the nearby dishcloth, and a few random crumbs that I didn't know existed until that very moment. The flames were rapidly climbing higher. My mind was racing. I didn't want to destroy the house, so I grabbed the fire extinguisher we had under the sink. But in my haste, I fumbled it. The safety pin wouldn't come off. My panic had fully taken over. I screamed for my mom, who was upstairs, probably still sleeping. But I was too busy trying to deal with the fire to even realize how loud I was being. After what felt like an eternity, I managed to finally get the fire extinguisher to work, and I put out the flames. The kitchen was a mess, completely covered in foam, and the smell of burnt eggs lingered in the air. My mom came rushing downstairs and saw the disaster in front of her. "What happened?" she asked, looking at the foam-covered kitchen with wide eyes. I didn't know how to explain it. So, I did what any self-respecting person would do in my position. I blamed the pan. "There's something wrong with that frying pan," I said, pointing at the still smoking remains. "It's like magic or something. It caught fire all by itself." My mom stared at the pan, then back at me. She knew me too well. "Magic," she said, raising an eyebrow. "You really think a frying pan just catches fire for no reason?" I panicked. "I mean, maybe it's a special kind of pan. I don't know. It just happened. I swear." She looked at the frying pan again, then to the burnt kitchen, and then back to me. "Well," she said with a deadpan expression, "if this is the magic frying pan, I'm going to need you to use it outside next time, because it's not staying in my kitchen." I ended up spending the rest of the day cleaning up the mess I'd made, including the stubborn stains left from the fire extinguisher foam. My mom refused to let me use the kitchen again for the rest of the weekend, and honestly, I didn't blame her. So, TIFU by setting my mom's kitchen on fire with a magic frying pan and blaming it on cookware that, in retrospect, probably just wasn't the right one to use for eggs. Lesson learned: when in doubt, stick to microwave burritos. Hey, friends! If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. TIFU by accidentally telling my girlfriend I didn't love her, and ruining our relationship for good. It all started about 6 months ago when my girlfriend, Emily, and I decided to take a weekend trip to the mountains. We had been dating for just under a year at the time, and things were great. We didn't argue much, we had similar interests, and honestly, everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. I'm not an overly emotional guy, at least, not outwardly, but I cared about her a lot. I thought I was ready to take the next step in our relationship. Now, I know what you're probably thinking, how could you possibly mess up a relationship if things were going so well? Well, sometimes the universe has a way of throwing things at you when you least expect it, and when it happens, you might not even realize how much of an impact it will have until it's too late. So, back to the trip. Emily and I had just gotten settled into our Airbnb cabin, a cozy little place surrounded by trees and complete silence, perfect for some downtime. It had been a long drive up there, and we were both pretty exhausted. We decided to just relax for the evening. After unpacking, we sat on the couch, had some wine, and talked about random stuff. We started reminiscing about how we first met, which led to a conversation about the future. Emily started talking about her dreams, her goals for the next few years, and her hopes for our relationship. She said she wanted to make sure that we were both on the same page about what we wanted long-term. You know, the kind of talk that makes you realize that your next steps are not just about what's happening now, but what will happen a few years down the road. She asked me what I thought about the idea of moving in together soon. Now, here's where I messed up. My brain, which was already a little foggy from the wine, didn't really know how to answer. I wanted to say something reassuring, something that would make her feel like I was equally excited about the future with her. But, for some reason, the words that came out of my mouth were nothing like what I had intended. Instead of saying something like, "Yeah, I'm excited about that too," or, "I think we should take it slow and see where things go," I said, I don't know if I'm ready for all that yet. I'm not sure if I'm even ready to say that I love you." There it was. The moment I said it, I knew I had messed up. Emily's face went completely blank. I immediately tried to backtrack, stammering something like, "I didn't mean it like that. It's just. I don't know, I'm still trying to figure things out. It's not that I don't care about you or anything. I do. A lot. I don't know if I'm at that point yet." But the damage was done. Emily didn't say anything right away. She just kind of stared at me for a few seconds before standing up and walking to the bedroom. I felt like I had just been slapped in the face. I followed her into the room, tried to apologize again, and told her I didn't mean to hurt her feelings, but she just kept shaking her head. "I don't know if I can do this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I tried to convince her that I wasn't trying to hurt her or imply anything bad about our relationship. I tried to explain that I cared about her deeply, but that I just wasn't ready to put a label on my feelings yet. I even tried to make a joke about it, saying something like, "You know I'm just a guy, right? We're not the best at talking about our feelings." But that only made things worse. "I'm not asking you to put a label on anything," she said, her eyes filled with frustration. "I just want to know if you care about me, if you see a future with me. If you can't even say you love me, then, what are we even doing here?" She left the room and went for a walk. I sat there for what felt like hours, trying to figure out what I had done wrong. In my mind, it wasn't like I didn't love her, it was just that I hadn't said it yet. But now, it was like I had ripped open a wound I didn't even know existed. She didn't come back for the rest of the night. I tried to reach out to her through text, but she didn't respond. The next morning, she had already packed her things and was about to leave. I begged her to stay, tried to tell her that I was an idiot and didn't mean to hurt her, but she was firm. "I can't be with someone who doesn't know how they feel about me," she said. "I need more than this." She left the cabin, and I was left alone to sit in the silence that had once felt so peaceful but now felt suffocating. Over the next couple of days, I tried to call her, text her, and apologize. I even wrote her a long message explaining everything, how much I cared about her, how I wanted to make things work, and how I was just too afraid to admit my feelings because I didn't want to rush into anything. But every time I tried to reach out, she wouldn't respond. Eventually, she texted me back, but it wasn't the response I was hoping for. "I can't keep doing this," she wrote. "I need someone who's sure about me. I'm sorry, but I think it's time for us to move on." That was the last message I received from her. After that, she blocked me on social media, and I never heard from her again. I tried to reach out a few more times, but I just got silence in return. Now, looking back, I realize how incredibly stupid I was. I had everything I wanted in front of me, a loving, supportive girlfriend who genuinely cared about me, and I screwed it up by not just saying what I felt. I let my fear of commitment and my inability to express myself destroy something beautiful. And honestly, I don't think I'll ever forgive myself for it. I've learned the hard way that sometimes, when it comes to relationships, it's not just about taking your time or being cautious. It's about being honest, vulnerable, and not letting fear dictate your actions. If you love someone, say it. Don't wait for the perfect moment or try to analyze it to death. Say it, mean it, and be ready to back it up with your actions. So, if there's one thing I hope anyone reading this takes away, it's this: don't be an idiot like me. Don't let fear or uncertainty keep you from expressing your feelings. Sometimes, saying the words "I love you" is the only thing that can keep a relationship from falling apart. I know that now, but it's too late for me to fix my mistake. I just hope that Emily is doing okay, and that she finds someone who can give her the love she deserves. And me? Well, I'll be here, still regretting the moment I let something beautiful slip away because I couldn't be honest with myself, let alone with her. So, I, 24M, decided to cook a nice dinner for this girl I've been crushing on, Emily, 23F. We've been talking for a few weeks now, and things were going well. We'd had a couple of dates, and she seemed to really like me. I figured, what better way to take things up a notch than by cooking her a nice homemade meal? I'd heard that cooking for someone could be romantic, and I wanted to show her I was thoughtful, so I decided to go all out. Now, I'm not a terrible cook. I can make basic stuff like pasta, stir-fries, and breakfast food, but I've never really ventured into the more complex, fancy dishes. But I was determined to impress her, so I thought, why not go for a gourmet meal? I spent the whole afternoon researching recipes, watching YouTube tutorials, and making sure I had all the right ingredients. I eventually settled on making chicken Alfredo with homemade garlic bread. Simple, right? But in my head, I was thinking, this is going to be the most amazing dinner she's ever had. I even bought a nice bottle of wine to go with it, hoping to give the meal a touch of sophistication. The first part of the evening went well. I had my kitchen fully stocked and my ingredients ready. I even managed to prep the chicken and veggies without cutting myself, big achievement for me, honestly. I was feeling good about myself. But then, the sauce. The Alfredo sauce was supposed to be creamy, rich, and smooth. I had all the ingredients for the sauce: butter, cream, garlic, and Parmesan. But, of course, I forgot one key detail. I didn't know that when making a creamy sauce like this, you have to be really careful with the temperature. Too hot, and the sauce will break. Too cold, and it won't thicken right. I didn't realize this until I already had the cream in the pan, and it started to look more like a curdled mess than anything remotely appetizing. Panicked, I tried to salvage it by adding more cream, but that just made things worse. Now, it was a weird, clumpy mess of cheese, butter, and cream. I thought, okay, no big deal. I'll just try to blend it. So I grabbed my blender and, in my desperation, poured the whole hot mess of sauce into it. Mistake number 1. When I turned on the blender, the hot cream splashed out of the top like a volcano, covering my face, my shirt, and the kitchen counter. I screamed in pain and shock, and as I was trying to clean myself up, I realized that I was wearing my best shirt, the one I had planned to look good in for the date. Now it was stained with a mixture of Alfredo sauce and panic. But I didn't let that stop me. I was determined to salvage this dinner. So I changed shirts, wiped up the mess, and decided to just serve the chicken and garlic bread with the disastrous sauce on the side. The bread, at least, turned out okay, despite me overestimating my bread-making abilities and slightly burning it. Now, I just had to make sure everything was ready when Emily arrived. I set the table, dimmed the lights, and poured the wine. I had all the perfect elements in place, except for the fact that the meal was a complete disaster. I decided to pretend like everything was fine. I mean, how bad could it be? Well, she arrived on time, and she looked amazing. I greeted her at the door with a nervous smile, and she complimented me on the ambience and the effort I'd put into setting everything up. My heart swelled. Maybe this was going to work out after all. We sat down at the table, and I brought out the plates. She was polite at first, taking a bite of the chicken Alfredo and saying it was good despite the fact that the sauce was more like lumpy soup. I smiled, but I could see she wasn't quite sure what to make of it. The conversation started off a little awkward, but we both tried to ease into it. I didn't really notice how much I was sweating until I realized that the awkwardness of the situation was making me more and more anxious. I kept offering wine, hoping it would break the tension. Then came the garlic bread. As I served it, I realized I had made a grave error. I had burned it a little. Not just a little, quite a lot. The outside was hard as a rock, but the inside was too doughy. But I didn't want to admit my mistakes, so I just shrugged and handed it over. Emily took a bite of the bread. It wasn't even chewable. I could see her trying to hide her disgust, but I could tell she didn't want to say anything. The tension was unbearable. So, in my genius attempt to recover the situation, I decided to make a joke. I said, "Well, at least the chicken is edible, right?" "Big mistake." She looked at me with a concerned expression and said, "Yeah, I think I'll pass on the bread. I don't want to risk breaking a tooth." At this point, I was so embarrassed that I could feel my face burning. I was panicking. I tried to laugh it off and went for another glass of wine, hoping it would help ease the awkwardness. That's when I did the dumbest thing I could have possibly done. In my attempt to appear smooth, I reached for the wine bottle and knocked over the entire glass of wine. It spilled all over the table, right onto the very shirt I had just changed into. This time, I didn't scream in pain. Instead, I just froze. Emily stared at me, wide-eyed. She stood up, not knowing what to do, and muttered something about helping me clean it up. I felt like an absolute failure. My perfect evening had turned into a disaster of epic proportions. To make matters worse, the clumsiness wasn't over yet. I stood up to go grab a towel from the kitchen, but in my panic, I tripped on the chair and fell backward. And when I hit the ground, my knee went straight into the corner of the coffee table. The pain shot up my leg, and I immediately started hobbling around like an idiot, trying to hide the fact that I had just injured myself in front of her. Emily was horrified at this point. She rushed over, asking if I was okay, and I just tried to laugh it off like it wasn't a big deal. But clearly, it was. I was in a ton of pain, and I could barely walk. The situation was so bad that we ended up calling it a night early, with me apologizing over and over again. She was kind enough to reassure me that it was fine and that she had a great time, but I could tell she was trying to be polite. I'm not sure if I'll ever hear from her again, but I'm hoping that at least she'll think of this as a funny story to tell her friends. Moral of the story: never attempt to cook a complicated meal to impress someone unless you really know what you're doing. And maybe don't try to look smooth while spilling wine and injuring yourself. It never goes as planned. TLDR, tried to cook a nice dinner for my crush, ended up burning the bread, making the sauce into a disaster, spilling wine, injuring myself, and ruining the evening. TIFU, by accidentally sending my friend a text meant for my therapist, and now I'm questioning everything about my life. So, a little backstory: I've been going through a rough patch lately. My personal life is a mess, work is stressful, and I've been dealing with some serious anxiety. I've been seeing a therapist for a couple of months now, trying to work through everything. It's been helping, but I've had my ups and downs, and honestly, therapy has become the one place where I can fully let my guard down. So, naturally, I text my therapist pretty often between appointments when something's bothering me. It's a convenient way to keep things on track without waiting a whole week for a session. One day last week, I was really having a bad day. Everything was going wrong, work was a disaster, my friend group was being weird, and I was feeling really overwhelmed. I was also feeling pretty lonely, which is something I hadn't really confronted before. But that day, it hit me hard. I had this thought that my friends were drifting away from me, and maybe I wasn't as important to them as I thought I was. I was spiraling, as I tend to do. So, I decided to text my therapist. The usual "I'm struggling" kind of message. But this time, I added some extra context. I'm not proud of it, but I was feeling pretty raw and vulnerable, and I decided to pour my heart out. The text read something like, "Hey, I know we're not supposed to dive too deep in texts, but I'm really struggling. I feel like my friends are growing apart from me, and I don't know if they even care anymore. I keep putting myself out there, but it feels like I'm invisible. I feel like they all have their own lives, and I'm just this extra person they tolerate. I hate this feeling. I feel like I'm always the one reaching out, always the one making the plans. It's exhausting. Maybe I'm just a burden to everyone." It was an emotional, raw text, and in hindsight, I realize I probably shouldn't have dumped all of that into a text message, especially not to my therapist, but I was in a place where I didn't really care about the format. I just needed to get it out. So, I hit send. Or at least, I thought I did. What happened next is one of the most embarrassing things I've done in a while. A few minutes later, I got a message back, but it wasn't from my therapist. It was from my friend Matt. Now, let me explain something about Matt. We've been friends for years, but we're not exactly close. We hang out sometimes, grab beers here and there, and talk about sports, but we're not the kind of friends who text each other deep personal stuff. In fact, I've always kept my personal struggles pretty close to the chest when it comes to him. He's more of the "I don't know how to talk about feelings" type of guy, and I never really expected to have any deep heart-to-heart conversations with him. But there it was, a text from Matt: "Dude, what the hell is this about? You feeling alright?" I froze. It took me a solid 10 seconds to process that I had accidentally sent my entire vulnerable, emotional text to Matt instead of my therapist. The worst part? I had just poured my heart out about feeling like my friends didn't care about me. And now, here I was, having to explain that to Matt, of all people. I tried to cover it up, but of course, I couldn't. My mind was racing, and I was thinking of every possible way I could fix this. I could tell him it was a mistake, that it was meant for someone else, but that would make things even more awkward. Or maybe I could just pretend it was no big deal. Act like I had been super open about my emotions all along? But no, I couldn't do that either. I wasn't ready to open up to him like that, and I didn't know how he would react. I decided to take the middle ground. I messaged back, "Oh, man, that was supposed to go to my therapist, haha. Sorry, didn't mean to dump that on you. But, yeah, I'm okay, just having a rough time." That sounded fine, right? It was casual enough to brush it off without making it into a huge deal. Or at least, I thought it was. Matt, to his credit, didn't blow it out of proportion. He responded with, "Yeah, I get it, man. I know we're not super close or whatever, but I care about you. You don't have to go through this alone. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." Now, in hindsight, I realized that Matt was trying to be a good friend. He was offering support in the best way he knew how. But at that moment, I wasn't ready for it. I didn't know how to process him suddenly being emotionally available. I hadn't even considered that he might care. I had this weird mix of relief and dread. I just didn't know what to say. So, I responded with a quick, "Thanks, I appreciate it." We left it at that, but the whole experience made me feel weirdly exposed. Like, not only had I accidentally sent my deepest, darkest insecurities to Matt, but now he knew things about me that I wasn't even ready to admit to myself. The next couple of days were even more awkward. I kept replaying the situation in my head, thinking about how I could have handled it differently. Every time Matt texted me, I felt this weird sense of anxiety. I wanted to make sure I wasn't oversharing, but at the same time, I felt like I had already crossed a line by making myself so vulnerable. Finally, I got a message from my actual therapist, who thankfully responded to my original text. We scheduled a session to talk about everything, and I confessed my mistake to her. She reassured me that it wasn't a big deal and that it was just a mix-up. She also said it was a good sign that I was reaching out for help and that I was opening up, even if it was accidentally to the wrong person. The thing is, now I'm in this weird position where Matt and I are in a place we've never been before. He's offering me support in a way I wasn't expecting, and I'm not sure how to accept it. I've never had to lean on him before, and now I'm not sure how to handle it. It feels like the dynamic between us has shifted. I didn't want to ruin our friendship by being vulnerable, but now I've unintentionally opened that door. So, yeah, that's my screw-up. I accidentally sent my deepest insecurities to the last person I wanted to, and now I'm left trying to figure out how to navigate a friendship that's unexpectedly taken a turn into the emotional deep end. At least now I know Matt cares, even if I didn't realize it before. But still, I'm not sure if I'm ready to have that level of connection with him. Maybe one day, I'll be able to fully embrace it. But for now, I'm just trying to figure out how to not feel so weird about it every time I text him. Moral of the story? Be careful who you send your vulnerable texts to, especially when you're having a rough day. And maybe, just maybe, you'll learn something new about the people you least expect. TIFU. By trying to surprise my girlfriend with a romantic weekend getaway and unintentionally ruining her entire birthday. So, here's the deal. My girlfriend, let's call her Emily, had been talking for months about how she really wanted to get away for her birthday. She mentioned several times that she'd love to escape the city, relax, and spend some quality time with me in a cozy cabin or a charming little bed and breakfast somewhere peaceful. Emily is a low-maintenance kind of person, so I knew she wasn't asking for anything extravagant, just a few days away from the hustle and bustle to recharge. I decided to take her up on this idea, but I also wanted to make it a surprise. I thought it would be amazing if I planned every detail, something that would knock her socks off and show her how much I care. The plan was to book a weekend away in a beautiful cabin up in the mountains, away from cell service, with a nice bottle of wine, and a cozy fireplace to make her feel special. She would have no idea what was coming. First things first, I did some research online and found this amazing cabin. It looked perfect, log cabin, secluded, surrounded by nature, and it was even dog-friendly. We have a golden retriever named Max, and she would love that he could come with us. The reviews were glowing, and the location seemed ideal, far enough out of the way to be quiet and peaceful but close enough to a small town if we needed anything. I was sold. The next step was the dates. Her birthday was in early October, and I knew she would be busy with work, so I booked the weekend right after her birthday, October 6th to 8th. This would give us both a chance to wind down and celebrate her special day without any distractions. I cleared it with her work schedule, I checked with her boss for time off under the guise of a surprise, and everything seemed to be falling into place. Here's where I made my first mistake. I didn't tell Emily about any of this. Not a word. I kept it all a secret, thinking it would be a bigger surprise if I just showed up on the day of her birthday with everything ready. I'm not great at keeping surprises, and I honestly thought she would appreciate the mystery and the effort. The weekend arrived, and I was feeling pretty damn proud of myself. I packed the car the night before, made sure Max was taken care of. Emily's sister was going to look after him for a few days, and got everything set to go. The only thing I needed to do was pick Emily up from her office, which was about 5 p.m. on Friday. I had already arranged for a birthday cake to be waiting in the cabin, and I brought along some of her favorite snacks and treats for the drive. I walked into her office at around 4:30 p.m. to surprise her. She was sitting at her desk, working away like usual. The look on her face when she saw me standing there was priceless. She was clearly shocked, but also clearly a little confused. "Hey, what's going on?" she asked, eyes wide. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to take you on a surprise trip," I said with a big grin, leaning against her desk. "A trip," she repeated, still a little puzzled. I nodded, holding out her bag and a folded-up hoodie. "Yep, we're leaving right now. I've already packed everything, and I even arranged for Max to be taken care of. It's going to be amazing." She looked around, slightly stunned. But my birthday's next week." And that's when I realized my massive, colossal mistake. I had completely forgotten that her birthday wasn't the 6th, but the 13th. It was 1 week later. I'd completely miscalculated the dates and booked the cabin for the wrong weekend. Her birthday wasn't for another week. Now, I know this is the part where you'd think I'd have a funny reaction, like, "Oh, I'll just make the best of it, let's go have some fun anyway," but nope. My brain froze. I stared at her blankly for a few moments, trying to process what had just happened. She looked back at me, completely speechless. You forgot," she finally asked, almost in disbelief. I tried to recover by saying something witty like, "Haha, yeah, I must have been too excited to get the details right," but it just came out awkward. I guess I got a little too ahead of myself with all the planning. She stood up slowly, looking at me with a mixture of shock and disappointment. "You planned a trip for my birthday, but it's not even my birthday weekend? You're kidding, right?" I had no good excuse. I was just too excited to surprise her and too caught up in trying to make everything perfect. I thought the surprise would be so great that she wouldn't even care about the date. So, there we were, me standing with a big, stupid grin on my face, and Emily looking at me like I had just told her I'd sold all her childhood keepsakes to buy a new car. I tried to salvage it, of course. I said something like, "Hey, we can still go. We'll just celebrate your birthday early." But, honestly, I could tell that she was deflated. "That's not the point," she said. "You completely messed it up. This was supposed to be a special trip for my birthday. I wanted it to be on my birthday. And now, it's just weird." She was right. I had taken what should have been a thoughtful gesture and turned it into a reminder that I couldn't even keep track of basic dates. I tried to backtrack, suggesting that we could maybe switch the trip to the following weekend and go on the actual date of her birthday, but she wasn't really having it. She was pretty upset, and who could blame her? Not only had I gotten the dates wrong, but I had been so focused on the surprise that I hadn't really listened to what she wanted or made her feel heard. It wasn't just about the trip, it was about her feeling loved and respected. To make matters worse, I had also arranged for a surprise birthday cake to be delivered to the cabin, which would have been sitting there, waiting for her, all alone. I had planned everything around her birthday, and now it all just felt out of place. In the end, we didn't go on the trip. We spent the night at home, where Emily barely spoke to me for a couple of hours. Eventually, we made up, but it wasn't the romantic weekend I had imagined. It was awkward, and I felt like a total idiot. She still appreciated the effort, but I could tell that I had missed the mark by a long shot. Lesson learned: surprises are great, but not when you can't even get the basic details right. And maybe, just maybe, next time I'll ask my girlfriend when her birthday actually is before booking anything. TIFU by accidentally becoming the most hated person at my family reunion. So, let me give you some context. I come from a big, loud, and somewhat dysfunctional family. Every year, we have a huge family reunion, where everyone gathers at my aunt and uncle's house out in the countryside. Think BBQs, beers, lawn games, and a lot of people trying to pretend that everything is perfect, even though the undercurrents of old grudges and petty drama are always bubbling under the surface. This year, I had made a promise to myself that I would try to be a more active participant and not just hang out in the corner like I usually do. I was determined to make this reunion different. I'm in my late 20s, and I've realized I need to make an effort to connect with my family more. Plus, this year, my cousin Sarah, who's about my age, had just gotten engaged, and I figured that this would be a good opportunity to bond with her and the rest of the family. Everything started off great. I got there early, helped set up some of the chairs, and made small talk with my cousins, aunts, and uncles. The drinks were flowing, the food smelled amazing, and everyone seemed in a good mood. But then, the unthinkable happened. The chaos started with a simple game of cornhole. You know, the one where you throw beanbags into a hole on a raised platform? Yeah, that game. Everyone was in a good mood, and a group of us started playing teams. I ended up on a team with Sarah, the bride-to-be, and her fiancé, Mark. Sarah and Mark are super into fitness, and I'll admit, they both look like they've stepped out of a fitness magazine. I'm not in bad shape, but I'm definitely not in the same league as them. So, we start playing, and immediately, I realize Sarah and Mark are incredibly competitive. Like, borderline aggressive about it. The whole family starts gathering around to watch, cheering and laughing, but I can tell that Sarah is getting more and more serious with each throw. I'm trying to stay calm, but Sarah keeps making little comments like, "Come on, we're not here to lose, are we? And you're throwing like my grandma, dude." I brush it off, because she's my cousin, and we're just playing a game, right? But then, things start to escalate. On my next throw, I miss the target by a mile. I mean, it was bad, like, I'm pretty sure the beanbag went off into another dimension. Everyone laughs, but Sarah doesn't let it go. She's like, "That's what I'm talking about. This is why we can't let you play these things. You're embarrassing us." Now, to be fair, I had a pretty bad throw. But that stung. I've always been the quiet one in the family, the one who sits back and lets everyone else take center stage. But at that moment, I felt like I needed to prove myself. So, I tell her, "It's just a game, Sarah. Chill out." She responds, "You don't get it. We're not here to just chill. This is supposed to be fun, but you're making it hard to have fun." It hit me wrong. For some reason, the words "making it hard to have fun" felt like a personal attack. Like I wasn't good enough to be a part of the fun. So, I snap. "Maybe it would help if you didn't treat this like it's the freaking Olympics, Sarah," I say. A hush falls over the group. Even Sarah's fiancé, Mark, who's usually the chill one, looks a little taken aback. But then, it gets worse. Sarah doesn't back down. She fires back, "Maybe if you actually tried instead of being a lazy, non-competitive loser, you'd get it." And that's when the bomb dropped. The entire family, who had been quietly watching, now starts murmuring. It's clear that they're all uncomfortable, but no one wants to speak up. The tension in the air is palpable. Then, my uncle, who's known for being the unofficial peacemaker of the family, steps in. He says, all right, let's calm down but it's too late." My anger gets the best of me, and I shout, "Yeah, because I don't have the right family values, right? It's always about winning, isn't it? If you're not at the top, then you're a loser, and no one gives a damn about you." At this point, people are starting to look at me like I've just kicked a puppy. Sarah's face turns bright red, and Mark looks completely uncomfortable. The rest of the family, who had been laughing and chatting just moments ago, is now dead silent. Realizing what I've just said, I try to backpedal, but it's too late. I fumble with my words. "Look, I didn't mean it like that. I'm just trying to have fun, okay? It's not all about winning. I just want to feel included." But no one's buying it. My uncle looks like he's about to blow a gasket, and my aunt, who usually stays out of family drama, gives me this look like I've just ruined Christmas. The rest of the game is a disaster. Everyone's either awkwardly avoiding eye contact or pretending they're still interested in the cornhole game. No one laughs. No one cheers. It's like someone dropped a bucket of cold water over the whole event. I'm sure they all just wanted to forget it, but I couldn't stop thinking about how I had just publicly embarrassed myself and destroyed the whole mood of the event. By the time the game is over, I'm just ready to leave. I grab a beer, but even that doesn't seem to help. My parents pull me aside and tell me that I need to apologize, but honestly, I didn't know how to fix it. I felt like I'd burned a bridge that wasn't easy to rebuild. Later that night, Sarah comes over to me and says, "Look, I didn't mean to upset you. I was just messing around, but I guess I took it too far." "I'm sorry." I tell her, "No, I'm sorry. I overreacted. I let my stupid pride get the best of me, and that was ridiculous. I shouldn't have said all that." She nods, but I can tell that things are still weird between us. We never really got back to our usual dynamic, and I know that this incident will be something that hangs over our family for a while. So yeah, that's how I ended up as the most hated person at the family reunion. It wasn't the most dramatic thing that's ever happened in our family, trust me, there have been worse incidents, but it was definitely the most embarrassing for me. I went in wanting to be more involved, but I ended up pushing everyone away instead. To anyone reading this, please learn from my mistake. When in doubt, just relax and don't take things too seriously, especially at family gatherings. If I had kept my cool, I'd still be the family hero instead of the villain. TLDR, got into a cornhole game with my competitive cousin and her fiancé. They roasted me for being bad at it. I snapped and said some hurtful things. Now I'm the most hated person at the family reunion. TIFU, by accidentally setting off my apartment's fire alarm while trying to cook dinner and nearly causing a neighborhood-wide evacuation. I was having a perfectly normal evening. It was a Friday, I had no big plans, and I decided to take the opportunity to finally cook a nice meal for myself. I'm not exactly a chef, more of a let's throw something together and hope it doesn't taste terrible type of person, but I figured I could handle making something simple, like stir-fry. It's just vegetables, some chicken, soy sauce, and a pan. How hard could it be? Well, apparently, it could be very hard. I started by chopping up the chicken and vegetables, but I quickly realized I hadn't taken into account one very important thing, the fact that my kitchen is tiny. I live in a small apartment, and the kitchen is just barely big enough to fit a single person, let alone multiple appliances or, an actual workspace. This is usually fine, but today, I had decided to go full force into cooking mode, and things immediately went south. I'd gotten the pan heated up, the chicken started cooking, and everything was going as planned. The air was starting to smell pretty good. It was the sweet scent of chicken cooking with the seasoning and the vegetables starting to crisp up. I was feeling confident. In fact, I was so confident that I turned my back for a second to grab the soy sauce from the cupboard. That was my mistake. When I turned back to the stove, I saw a flash of orange, then heard a loud sizzling sound followed by an almost cartoonish hissing noise. My first thought was that maybe the oil in the pan had splattered up a bit, but then I saw a column of smoke rising from the pan. Panicked, I grabbed a spatula and tried to stir things, but the fire just kept getting worse. In a complete state of panic, I did what anyone who isn't a seasoned chef would do. I slapped the pan onto the nearest counter and turned on the kitchen's fan at full blast. The smoke just kept billowing out of the pan like a damn fog machine. My immediate thought was, okay, the fan is working, so I just need to turn off the stove and everything will be fine. But the fan wasn't enough. The smoke detectors in my apartment were about to remind me how much they hated me. Within seconds, I heard the shrill, ear-piercing beep of the fire alarm. I froze. The fire alarm in my apartment has this annoying, high-pitched tone that sounds like it's warning the entire building of some sort of catastrophe. I rushed to turn off the stove, but the alarm just kept blaring. In my haze of panic, I accidentally knocked over a glass of water onto the stove, and now I had a weird steam and smoke combo happening in the kitchen. I had made everything worse. I frantically waved a towel in front of the smoke detector to try to get it to turn off, but the thing just kept going. It's like the damn alarm was laughing at me. That's when I realized something horrifying. I had completely forgotten to open the windows to vent out the smoke. Now the entire kitchen was full of it, and it was starting to leak into the living room. I rushed to the windows and threw them open, but the fire alarm was still blaring at full volume. In my panic, I grabbed my phone to call the building's management. I had lived here long enough to know that the fire department was probably going to show up, and I wasn't sure I could explain this in a way that wouldn't involve me being put on a watch list. But as I dialed the number, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment. And then, from the other side of the door, I heard someone yell, "Is everything okay in there?" We heard the alarm and thought there was a fire. This was my nightmare. I couldn't even respond because the fire alarm was so loud. So, I did what any rational person would do in this situation. I screamed, "I'm fine," which, in hindsight, probably didn't sound reassuring at all. But I thought I might as well try to calm them down before they decided to call the fire department themselves. The person outside my door didn't respond right away, but a few seconds later, I heard the unmistakable sound of a fire truck pulling up outside. At this point, I was in full-blown meltdown mode. I slammed the phone back on its charger and ran to my door, opening it just as the fire department showed up. There were at least 4 firefighters standing outside, and they all turned to look at me. The fire alarm was still blaring in the background. The firefighter at the front stepped forward and said, "Ma'am, we got a call that there was a possible fire in your apartment. Are you okay?" I could feel my face turning bright red as I muttered, "Yeah, I was cooking and it was a little smoky. I guess I forgot about the stove for a second." The firefighter looked over at the smoke detector, then back at me, then at the group of firefighters behind him, who were all just standing there, looking awkwardly at each other. One of them finally spoke up. "Are you sure everything's fine? Because, the whole building's been evacuated. There's a lot of smoke." I blinked. "Wait, what? The whole building?" "Oh no, I didn't mean to." I was cut off by a woman from the next apartment over, who appeared at the hallway entrance. She looked annoyed and a bit frazzled. "Hey, we just got out of our apartment, and I almost had to leave the dog behind because of you." I was mortified. "I didn't know it would get this bad," I stammered. I wasn't thinking." "I'm so sorry." The firefighter gave me a sympathetic look but clearly had that "we've seen this kind of thing 100 times" vibe. He nodded and said, "It's okay. Just keep an eye on your cooking next time, all right?" Of course, that wasn't the end of it. The building manager showed up shortly after and made me sign a paper about keeping fire safety in mind. I was not only the cause of a minor panic in my own building but also had a brigade of firefighters come to my door for what amounted to a slightly overcooked stir-fry. The fire department had to make sure everything was safe, so they hung around until the smoke had cleared out and the alarm finally shut off. As I walked back into my apartment after all of that, I realized I'd never actually finished cooking the dinner I'd started. The chicken, which had been perfectly fine when I started, was now overcooked and burned to a crisp. But I didn't even care anymore. I just stood there, surrounded by the faint smell of smoke and shame, and swore to myself that I would never, ever try to cook again. At least, not without making sure my kitchen was better ventilated. Moral of the story: if you're cooking in a tiny apartment with a smoke alarm that thinks it's a siren, just order takeout. It's way less stress. So, I recently moved into a new apartment. It's not fancy, but it's in a decent neighborhood, and it seemed like a perfect fit for me. I was excited to get settled in, so I immediately started unpacking and setting up. Everything was going smoothly until I decided to do a deep cleaning on my second day. I wanted everything to be fresh and shiny, like something out of a Pinterest cleaning post. Little did I know, my cleaning spree was about to spiral into one of the most embarrassing and disastrous things I've ever done. It all started with the bathroom. I've always been a bit of a germaphobe, so I figured I should scrub every surface: walls, floor, sink, tub, toilet. I wasn't going to leave a single speck of dust. While scrubbing the shower, I noticed there was some soap scum buildup on the tiles. I had a bottle of a high-strength, industrial cleaner that promised to remove everything. It was the kind of cleaner that makes you feel like you've entered a chemical warfare zone. The label said to keep away from pets, children, and sensitive surfaces. Perfect, I thought. Nothing in this bathroom is sensitive, right? I sprayed the cleaner generously, and instantly the room was filled with a potent, chemical smell that made my eyes water. I turned on the fan to try and ventilate the place and, being the responsible adult I am, decided to step outside for a breath of fresh air. As I stepped out onto my balcony, I felt a bit proud of myself. The apartment was looking great, and it smelled clean, albeit a bit like a public restroom in an airport. About 10 minutes later, I went back inside to check on the progress. The smell was even worse now, more overwhelming. I went straight to the bathroom, trying to hold my breath as I crossed the threshold. That's when I realized I had made a huge mistake. The cleaner wasn't just on the tiles and the tub. I had sprayed it all over the shower curtain, the towels, the floor mats, and, in my hurry, had even sprayed the mirror above the sink. The air felt thick with chemicals, almost like I had trapped myself in a hot, toxic box. I decided it would be best to open a window and let it air out. I grabbed some old towels, opened the bathroom window, and threw them out onto the balcony to help get rid of the awful smell. While doing this, I noticed something strange. From my balcony, I could see that my neighbor across the building, an older woman I'd seen a few times but didn't really know, had her window wide open too. She seemed to be looking straight at me. I waved awkwardly and gave her a nervous smile, hoping she hadn't noticed the strange pile of towels I had just tossed outside. She smiled back and then gave me a friendly wave. I felt a little better, thinking everything was normal again. But it wasn't. As I turned back to go inside, the smell hit me again. And it wasn't just the cleaner. There was a weird burning smell now, something not quite right. Panic started to rise in my chest as I realized that something was definitely wrong. I rushed inside and checked everything. The fan was on, the windows were open. There was no visible smoke, but the smell was persistent. That's when I saw it. Smoke. Thin, wispy smoke was curling up from underneath the bathroom door. My heart dropped. I frantically ran to the door, opened it, and was hit with an explosion of smoke. The room was hazy, and I could barely see through the thick fog. My first thought was that the bathroom had caught on fire somehow. I ran in, grabbed the shower curtain, and tried to yank it down to stop whatever might be happening, but it felt stuck. In my panic, I did the only thing that seemed logical at the time. I turned the shower on full blast. My plan was to drench whatever was on fire, but I was so flustered I didn't realize I had set the shower to the wrong temperature. When the water came out, it was cold, and as it hit the chemical-laden floor, it made the room's air even worse. The smoke was now thicker, and I was struggling to breathe. My eyes were watering, and my throat was tightening from the fumes. I managed to tear the shower curtain down, and that's when I realized the real cause of the smoke. The combination of the industrial cleaner, the heat from the water, and the fact that I had left the fan on high had somehow created a noxious chemical reaction. I was in over my head. In my panic, I grabbed my phone and called 911. The operator answered, and I tried to explain what had happened through labored breathing. There's smoke. I don't know if there's a fire. I think I might have done something wrong with the cleaning supplies. The operator was calm, thank goodness, and assured me that they would send someone to check it out. As soon as I hung up, I realized that I might be in trouble. I had no idea if the building would be evacuated or what the consequences might be. While I waited, I heard a knock at my door. My heart sank. I opened it to find the fire department, 3 firefighters in full gear, looking serious. I must have looked like a wreck. They walked in, immediately started assessing the situation, and within minutes, they identified what had happened. Apparently, mixing certain cleaning products, especially those with ammonia or bleach, can create dangerous fumes when exposed to heat. Who knew? I certainly didn't. After some quick ventilation and checking around, they confirmed that there wasn't a fire, just the toxic buildup of fumes. They were able to help clear the air, but I was still mortified. And to make matters worse, my neighbor from across the way had come over to see what was going on. She had apparently smelled the fumes too and thought something was burning. She was sweet about it, but I could tell she was concerned. To make up for the disaster, I offered her some homemade cookies as a peace offering, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd made a terrible first impression. The fire department eventually cleared out, and everything was fine. They advised me to never mix certain chemicals again and to use cleaning products that are safer and more natural. I thanked them profusely and promised to be much more careful in the future. As for the apartment, it took hours to get the air clear, and the smell lingered for a couple of days. It took me almost a week to air out the place fully. The worst part? I later found out that the cleaner I had used was an industrial-grade product specifically designed for commercial use, not for your average person to have in their home. And to this day, I've never lived down the fact that my first impression in the building was an emergency response. So, yeah. TIFU by making my new apartment smell like a toxic waste zone, nearly setting it on fire, and involving the fire department on day 2 of my move-in. TIFU by accidentally sending a text to my boss that was meant for my friend about quitting my job. It all started on a lazy Friday afternoon. I had just wrapped up a few big projects at work and had nothing pressing left on my plate for the day. My boss had left the office early, as usual, and I decided to take advantage of the lull by scrolling through my phone. I had been working at the company for almost 2 years, and while I liked the people I worked with, I was growing tired of the same routine and lack of growth. I was already thinking about a potential career change and had been talking to my friend, Tyler, about it for weeks. Tyler and I had always been close. We met in college and instantly bonded over our shared sense of humor and our love for spontaneous adventures. Over time, he became my sounding board for everything, including work frustrations. Recently, I had been complaining to him about the company I worked for, the lack of appreciation from management, and how I was feeling stuck. I'd been toying with the idea of quitting, but I wasn't ready to take the leap just yet. My frustration had been building, but I was still playing the waiting game, hoping that something would change. On this particular day, I was venting to Tyler via text about how fed up I was. I was telling him that I just couldn't take it anymore, and how I was thinking of just quitting my job and finding something else. I was writing the message as a kind of catharsis, fully intending to send it to Tyler for moral support. However, in my half-bored, distracted state, my thumb slipped, and I sent the message to the wrong person. At first, I didn't even notice. I kept typing another message, elaborating on my frustration. I hit send, and then a sinking feeling started to creep up on me as I glanced at the name on the text thread. I had just sent it to my boss, Mr. Reynolds. I sat there frozen for a moment, my mind racing. My stomach dropped. This couldn't be happening. I immediately checked the message that had been sent. It read, "Honestly, I can't do this anymore. I'm fed up. I need to quit this job. It's so draining and thankless. I swear they don't appreciate me at all. I think I might just do it. I don't even care anymore." It was a long message, full of emotion, and it was definitely not something I ever intended to send to my boss, especially since he had no clue that I felt this way. He was always a little distant, a little detached, but I had never expressed any dissatisfaction with my work directly to him. My first instinct was to grab my phone and throw it across the room. Instead, I just stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity, paralyzed by panic. I had to do something, and fast. I immediately opened a new text and tried to call Tyler. I needed to vent, to tell someone what had happened, and to beg for advice. As soon as I pressed the call button, the phone rang and rang. No answer. Of course. He was probably at the gym, or out running errands, or living his life while I was about to lose mine. I panicked and frantically typed a response to my boss, trying to dig myself out of the hole I had just created. My hands were shaking as I wrote, "Mr. Reynolds, I'm so sorry about that message. That was meant for my friend. I've just been feeling really stressed lately, and it came out wrong. I didn't mean any of it. I am absolutely committed to my work here, and I really value the opportunities I've been given. Please disregard that text. I reread the message several times before pressing send. It wasn't perfect, but it was all I could come up with in my frazzled state. I hit send, and I waited. I continued to stare at my phone like a hawk, hoping for some sort of response that would confirm I hadn't just sabotaged my career in one fell swoop. A few minutes passed, and I still hadn't heard back from my boss. My anxiety was reaching a fever pitch. I considered calling him, but that felt even worse, like I was drawing more attention to my screw-up. I tried to distract myself by checking my emails, but my mind kept returning to the horror of the situation. Then, the text came through. It was short and to the point, "Thanks for clarifying. Let's talk on Monday. Enjoy the rest of your day." I felt a little relief. At least he didn't seem completely angry, but I was still terrified of what Monday might bring. The weekend loomed ahead, and I spent the next couple of days replaying the incident over and over in my head, imagining every possible scenario. Would he fire me on the spot? Would he give me a warning? Would I have to explain myself in person? Monday came, and I showed up to the office with my heart pounding. I walked into the building and took the elevator up to the floor where my boss's office was located. Every step felt like a mile, and my palms were sweating as I knocked on his door. "Come in," he called. I opened the door, trying to remain calm, but my nerves were all over the place. Mr. Reynolds was sitting at his desk, looking at some paperwork. He didn't even look up as I entered, which was both a blessing and a curse. I wasn't sure whether he was avoiding eye contact because he was mad or if it was just his usual detached demeanor. "Sit down, please," he said without emotion. I took a seat, my hands clasped in my lap to stop them from shaking. I wanted to say something, anything to break the silence, but I felt like whatever I said would only make things worse. After what seemed like forever, Mr. Reynolds finally spoke. "I read your message. I understand you were frustrated. We all have moments like that, and I appreciate you being honest about your feelings. But I need you to understand that messages like that, especially about quitting, aren't something you can just send out without thinking. I'm going to assume this was a one-time mistake, and I'll let it slide for now. But next time, I expect you to handle your frustrations more professionally. Do I make myself clear?" I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Yes, absolutely. I'm really sorry about that. It won't happen again." "Good. Now, let's get to work," he said, dismissing me with a wave. I walked out of his office with a huge weight lifted off my shoulders, but I also couldn't help but feel embarrassed. I had narrowly avoided a catastrophe, but the damage had still been done. From that day on, I was a lot more careful about who I texted, and I double-checked my messages before sending them. Lesson learned. I'm just glad that Mr. Reynolds was a little more understanding than I expected. And Tyler? He still hasn't let me live it down. I get a text from him at least once a week saying, "Don't quit your job, unless you're texting me about it, of course." Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.